I'm Samantha Eric here with Brian Dunseth for this week's RSL Preview.
That's my Pecky lean right here.
Yeah, I was going to say...
okay, this is comfortable. I need to do this more often.
Don't start adapting. I think you should. You look better when you're sitting up.
Thank you, Mom. Let's go.
Let's go.
Do this.
Well, it is a big matchup this weekend, Dunny. Portland Timbers coming to town. But before we jump into the opponent and the game this weekend, a few things we need to unravel from Sunday's matchup at LA. First and foremost, your thoughts on the whole post-game situation, Nedum, Zlatan. We haven't gotten to speak about it yet.
Yeah, no, listen, I was accused of being a Zlatan apologist on Twitter.
You do like him a lot.
I do like him because he's a hero and he's a villain. He's a goal scorer and he's brash and he's cocky and he's confident. But I feel like you and I sat at the stadium last week and we talked about Zlatan manufacturing these situations where he needs to get into a fight or a scuffle, and that kind of makes him live, and that's exactly what he said after the game. Now, when you come up against players, you can say, you have the right to say whatever you want.
Right.
But within that, there are the context of responsibility. And when you're talking to a guy like Nedum, who has played for Manchester City, who's played for Sunderland, who's played at QPR, with QPR, who's come up against guys like Zlatan or Cristiano Ronaldo, there becomes a certain point where there's a line that's crossed that can never be recovered. And I obviously couldn't hear what Zlatan was saying to Nedum, but you could tell in the midst of the conversation, it was personal. And then when the goal was scored, and
clapping,
we saw him do this with Sonny last season, kind of turn and start to taunt. Now, he picked up the yellow card, which was absolutely correct. But then for the taunting, Zlatan's never going to get a yellow for taunting. Now, I did feel as though when he ran up the backside of Nedum and he kind of did the two hands at the back of the head, I thought that was the point where the referee could have been afforded the opportunity to make a decision. But again, within the context of who Zlatan is and how he goes about his individual battles, there's a line that I think that sometimes he crosses, sometimes he doesn't cross. But in the midst of this, he's done this entire career. You watch any of these Netflix documentaries about Zlatan Ibrahimovic, this is who he is since being a 17-year-old at Malmo. So the disciplinary committee, everything that happens on the field, that's one thing. Now,
the post-game.
The post-game's different because you'll have players that like each other or have had some type of disagreement on the field, and then when there's an apology in play, what you would think would happen would
politely.
The player would be escorted to the opponent's locker room at home or on the road, and at that locker room, you come up against a team administrator and be like a Tim Weaver type of person, and then on top of that, it would be the knock on the door, or he would go in and grab Nedum and say, hey, Nedum, Zlatan wants to apologize. But when you walk into somebody else's locker room, that's where it starts to become kind of a security protocol issue.
Right.
And I think that's where, if there isn't an official line that was crossed, I think what this will afford the league to do
will be a rule put in place.
Is to at least figure out the verbiage of what is or is not acceptable. And we have players all the if let me put it this way. If this was Kyle Beckerman in this situation and he had walked into the LA Galaxy's locker room or had been at Rio Tinto Stadium and walked into the visiting locker room, this would have been a bigger issue where I feel the league would have gotten involved immediately. Whereas with Zlatan, listen, he's being paid a tremendous amount of money for the goals that he scores and the effect that he has both on and off the field. And we got to be okay with just understanding that there's
okay with that, but I
treatment.
Also am okay with Nedum saying, I don't want to have
100%.
this conversation.
100%.
And that's where I was getting, I needed to step back and not respond on Twitter just because I couldn't find MLS rules about protocol and who can enter locker rooms, what the proper steps are to take. And so I didn't feel comfortable saying anything. But at the same time, I know Nedum since he's gotten here. He's a stand-up guy. Really nice.
Super intelligent.
He's not looking
really nice
to fight with people. And I'm okay if he says, I don't want that conversation after what went on the field. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, and listen, Zlatan is who Zlatan is on the field in front of the cameras is obviously going to be different than Zlatan is as a person outside. And everyone that I've spoken to with regards to the LA Galaxy absolutely loves him.
Yeah.
But also recognizes that when he crosses that line, whether it's at training or any sort of competition, that he becomes the Lion. And the Lion is a caricature. It's a shtick to a certain perspective. So for Natum, listen, if you want to call him soft, okay, call him soft. If you want to say like he just needs to understand that's fine. But the reality is for Natum, he had every right to deny Zlatan that opportunity to apologize, and he doesn't have to accept his apology. And guess what? Everything's going to be fine.
And my question to you, you've been in heated, I'm sure, one-on-one battles that go on within the game. If you had just lost in the way that it went down, I mean, RSL was the better team in the second half. Looked like they could go on to win. You're frustrated. You just gave up that goal to the guy that's been taunting you. Do you really want to see him in your locker room right after that game when you're trying to decompress?
No,
I mean, that was my question.
And I think that comes down to how it was handled and being escorted over there and having someone with you. In the bigger context, maybe the right move was ask Tim or knock on the door and ask for Natum to come out. And if he chooses to, he does. If not, and at least he's made his form of an apology. He's made his attempt. But again, I think what's on the field can be left on the field unless players feel as though a line was drawn, a line was crossed. And Natum obviously felt that throughout his career, he's come up with some really big, significant battles and big personalities and big type of players. And he felt that this one was maybe taken a little bit too far.
All right, well, back to on-the-field stuff. Yeah. As I said, I thought that RSL looked to be the aggressive team in the second half.
Much better second half.
Energy. Yeah. What was different? What did you see?
Well, when you talk about the start, I hate when people say start on the front foot.
I didn't want to say it.
Yeah. I thought that the way that LA Galaxy started was indicative of a team that is playing their third game in 8 days, is that at home, and recognizing if they could get the jump on Real Salt Lake in the first 15 minutes, that could give them a massive advantage because they knew inevitably they were going to fade sometime in the second half, which is what we saw. But I think a couple things happened. Number one, both outside wingers, whether it was Pontius or Antuña, did a really good job creating the width and the height. Then in the midst of that, Sebastian Lletget, Joe Corona, and Zlatan Ibrahimovic, there was a lot of movement, a lot of interchanging movement, where Zlatan would drop back into the midfield, then you'd have Lletget or Joe Corona making that secondary run, or you'd have the two wingers invert themselves. And I think they created a lot of confusion with regards to where the responsibility lied with who was tracking what run. And just that little piece, that little dummy, that little feint and the ball coming through, and everyone kind of just for that split second stops. Those are the moments where you're talking about a really intelligent goal scorer, understanding where he is and what the buildup and the look looks like. So first 45, you kind of put it away. Second 45, it's a different mentality. You've had the chance to regroup. You've tightened the screws. Everyone's had conversations about what they feel like they need to be better at. The coaches obviously have their say. And then the intensity was really, I think, brilliant, the start of the second half, and the chances that were generated and the movement off the ball and the way they were dragging LA Galaxy around. Whether it's Dami hitting the crossbar,
that one was
which would have made it 1-1. Donny Toya getting the goal, which makes it 1-1. Dami's hit that hits the back of the foot of Steris, which I still think would beat the goalkeeper David Bingham. That could have made it 3-1, if not make it 2-1. And then, Sebastian Lletget with a little dip of the shoulder and the quick service and Zlatan's finish. It just shows you the fine margins of success and failure in a league, especially in the Western Conference. And if you choose to look at it glass half full, you say, okay, well, here we go again, right? That one little mistake punishes you. But if you look at the glass half full, I feel as though you can look at Houston, you can look at Seattle, where Jefferson hits the post. You can look at the start in D.C.
LAFC.
You can look at LAFC, where it takes a deflection from a center back.
Right.
And then you look at this game, and in a way, in a much, much, much more positive scenario, you're looking at a team where last year we were saying, okay, it's inexperience, it's youth, it's opportunity. Whereas this year, I think you're saying, I can see something, I can feel something, I can smell something. This group, while coming up a little bit short right now, has kind of the earmarks of a team that, as they put it together in the stretch run, as long as they can stay within touching distance and knowing the start of the season, and it's been hellacious with the amount of road games, Now you're looking at 3 out of 4 next games at home against competition who have had significant struggles of their own.
Well, speaking of road games, Portland coming to town this weekend. They've been on the road. Well, they're in the midst of a 12-game road spell as they await Providence Park's renovation opening. They'll do
amazing.
that June 1st. They're coming to town. They have been, they started the season struggling, have won now back-to-back games. What have you seen from them? What's a little different in this last couple games?
Well, I think first you address the center back situation and Liam Ridgewell leaving the club. So now you're saying Tui Loma and Mabiala, you're our guys. Or at least that's what we think are our guys. And then you think about a short recovery time because it's an MLS Cup final. You think about the amount of games that they're on the road and a team that was shipping 3.5 goals per match heading into Columbus. Right. And I guess sometimes the best tonic is facing your old manager that still has kind of deep roots in terms of the players with Caleb Porter. And probably a Columbus team that was, the results, while really positive to start the season, maybe some of those results were a little bit of a house of cards situation. So a massive result there. Then you go to Toronto, and Toronto, I think, is still struggling to figure out who they are defensively at times, but with the addition of Pozuelo and the injury to Josie Altidore, you've got this really, really big positive when these two players are on the field at the same time linking up, and then you've got the negative of Josie with another muscle injury. So massive, massive results, back-to-back wins, and I look at this Portland team, and I said it at the end of the post-game show last week. If you can get an early goal, if you can kind of jump out on them a little bit, I'd be interested to see what the mentality is of this team. Just knowing that earlier in the season they conceded so many goals at such an alarming rate, but now we're coming up with way more confidence than they would have had in the past 10 days.
Well, not a ton of changes to their roster from the one that made it all the way to MLS Cup last season. They got the better of RSL last year. How do you think these teams match up in 2019?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that when you look at the results itself and the manner in which the Portland Timbers played, it was kind of the bogey team of Real Salt Lake. And when push came to shove, those 2 games, home and away against Portland, really threw a dent in the aspirations for the playoff hunt right near the end of the season. Portland's always matched up well, but then as I say that, I look at some of these incredible results that RSL's had both home and away against the Portland Timbers. So in terms of matching up, you have athletes, you have intelligence difference makers, you have big burly defenders, and you have set pieces where you're gonna scratch, you're gonna claw, you're gonna fight for every single inch there is on the field. So what I always say is anytime Kyle Beckerman and Diego Chara are involved, it's a battle in the midfield. They're going to lump each other up and down the field. Outside of that, I think right now with the way the roster is built, for me, Real Salt Lake is the stronger starting 11, even without Nick Rimando and Everton Luiz. But over the course of 90 minutes, the result will tell me if I'm right or wrong.
I can't wait to see. I like the Kyle Chara matchup, but Everton Chara.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah.
Everton reminds me of Chara.
Yeah, no, in a lot of ways he does. With the amount of ground that he covers, the kind of little Chihuahua antagonistic bite. Yeah, no, not pit bulls. It's like the Chihuahua taking on the pit bull. That's why, because they're just always nipping at the back of the heels.
Guzman is more of a pit bull.
Yeah, and Diego's kind of like, he always goes like, what, me?
Big smile.
He's got that big smile. Like, I didn't do anything when he just took somebody's leg off. Right. It's a fun battle. And again, when you have guys like Sebastian Blanco and Diego Valeri on the field, you have difference makers. And Abobasi right now, I think that striker position, even though he has 4 goals in 7 games.
7, yeah.
I think that was the main weakness for that team, especially in the MLS Cup final. It was pretty evident. And there was a reason why the Portland Timbers were linked with so many players from Liga MX that were big-time goal scorers and that were kind of at that price tag right around $10 million, but they just couldn't get those deals over the line.
Well, RSL hosting the Portland Timbers this Saturday at 7 p.m. You can get your tickets at rsl.com. We'll both be there. Come and join. It's going to be a good one.